I paid for my parents' lawyer after they were sued. We'll lose everything, they pleaded. When they won, they cut me out of the will. We never needed you, Dad smirked. He didn't know I was the anonymous buyer of his company, and I just fired him. I should have known better. When my parents called me that night, voices shaking, desperation seeping through the phone, I didn't hesitate. They're suing us, Alex. We could lose everything. My mother's voice cracked. We need you. They had never needed me before. Now when I put myself through college with scholarships while they poured every dime into their business. Now when I worked 14-hour shifts to survive, while they took vacations, always just a little too busy to check in. Now when I struggled to keep my first apartment, scraping by while they lived comfortably. But I was their son, and despite everything, I couldn't stand by and watch them drown. So I paid $250 grand. Gone overnight, wired straight into their lawyer's account. My entire savings, years of careful planning, all because they begged. And because, stupidly, I still love them. The trial was brutal. Long hours, endless testimonies, and a sinking feeling in my gut that my parents weren't telling me the whole truth. Their accusers painted them as liars, thieves who manipulated contracts and exploited loopholes to build their empire. I refused to believe it, until they won. And everything changed. The gratitude I expected never came. The relief? A mask, hiding something else. Smugness. Satisfaction. Like they had just played the greatest hand of their lives. Then, 2 weeks later, I found out. They had rewritten their will. Cut me out entirely. Not a dime. Not mention. My father just smirked when I confronted him. We never needed you, he said, voice dripping with amusement. But you needed to believe we did. That's the difference between us, Alex. You're weak. Always were. I walked out that night, rage burning deep in my chest. I didn't need revenge. Not then. But fate has a way of delivering opportunities. And 6 months later, I saw my father's company listed for sale. He was drowning in debt. So, I became the anonymous buyer. And now, it's time for him to feel what it's like to lose everything. Starting with his job. I didn't rush. Revenge, real revenge, isn't about striking fast. It's about precision. Letting them think they're safe. Letting them believe they're in control. I watched from the shadows as my father scrambled to keep his company afloat. Missed payments. Delayed orders. Investors backing out. His empire, the one he had chosen over his own son, was crumbling. And then came the offer. I made sure it was the only one on the table. A mystery investor with deep pockets promising to save him from ruin. He had no choice. He took the deal. Signed away 51% of his company to an anonymous buyer. Me. He never saw it coming. The moment the ink dried, I had control. And the first order of business? His termination. The boardroom was silent when I walked in. My father sat at the head of the table, eyes scanning the room, oblivious. Until I spoke. I assume everyone's read the new shareholder agreement. My voice was calm, measured. His head snapped up, his brows furrowed. Confusion first, then realization, then rage. You. I smiled. Me. The room was suffocating in tension. My father shot up from his chair, fists clenched. This is a joke. I slid the termination papers across the table. You're fired. His nostrils flared. You little. Security will escort you out. His face twisted into something ugly. You think you've won? His voice dropped, sharp as a knife. You have no idea what I'm capable of. I leaned in. Neither do you. He didn't have a choice. The security team was already in the room, waiting. He could make a scene, throw a tantrum, but it wouldn't change a damn thing. I watched as they led him away, shoulders rigid, pride shattered. It should have felt like victory, but something wasn't right. Because as he passed me, he whispered, "This isn't over." And I believed him. This isn't over. His words stuck with me. I should have ignored them. Should have let it go. But when you grow up with a man like my father, you learn one thing. His THR aren't empty. And I was right. 3 days later, things started to shift. First, a minor delay in payroll. Then, an accidental security breach. Documents went missing. Confidential contracts leaked. Employees started whispering. Doubt creeping in. Then came the investors. Suddenly hesitant. Suddenly reconsidering. Sabotage. It had my father's fingerprints all over it. But that wasn't what got to me. It was a phone call. Late at night. No caller ID. But the voice on the other end? I knew it too well. Calm. Cold. Calculated. Enjoying my company, son? I clenched my jaw. It's mine now. A soft chuckle. For now. I didn't respond. Silence is power. He taught me that. But he wasn't finished. Tell me, how does it feel? Watching something you fought for slowly fall apart. I exhaled sharply. I wouldn't know. You're the one who lost everything. A pause. Just long enough to feel dangerous. You're playing a game you don't understand, Alex. I didn't let him hear the flicker of doubt in my chest. And yet, I'm winning. He sighed. You always need to prove yourself. Even as a boy. A beat. Tell me, did it ever bother you that no matter what you did, it was never enough? My grip tightened on the phone. You're stalling. And you're distracted. His voice sharpened. Look around, son. You think you took everything from me? No. I'll let you have it. And now I'm taking it back. The line went dead. And suddenly I knew this wasn't about business anymore. This was war. This was war. And he was already 2 moves ahead. The morning after his call, I walked into the office to find chaos. 3 top executives gone, resigned overnight. Half the board was suddenly questioning my leadership. Rumors were spreading. Investors were nervous. And at the center of it all, a file sitting on my desk. Leaked documents. My signature was forged on fraudulent contracts. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed I was guilty. I picked up the folder, flipping through the evidence. It was perfect. Too perfect. Then my phone buzzed. No caller ID. I answered. Messy morning, son? I exhaled slowly. You must be bored in retirement. His chuckle was soft, infuriating. Retirement? No. I've simply upgraded my position. You see, I've always been the puppet master. I just let you dance for a while. I turned to my assistant. Find out who leaked this and fire them. My father sighed. That's adorable. But by now, you should know it's never that simple. I clenched my jaw. You're desperate. That's what this is. You're grasping at straws. Silence. Then his voice dropped to a whisper. Desperate? No, Alex. I'm winning. And just like that, the line went dead. An hour later, the SEC showed up at my office. An official investigation. My father had set the board against me, turned my employees against me. Now, he was turning the government against me. I stared at the agents as they confiscated files, computers, evidence of crimes I didn't commit. I should have been afraid, but I wasn't, because he had just made his first mistake. He had pushed too hard, and now I was about to push back. I wasn't stupid. I knew how this worked. My father played dirty because he never expected anyone to outmaneuver him. But he forgot something. I learned from him. So, while the SEC tore through my office, I stayed calm. Because unlike him, I had real evidence. He had been sloppy, too eager, too convinced of his own invincibility. I had spent months preparing for this moment, tracking his moves, collecting proof. Bank statements, false accounts, bribes, and the final piece, the hidden evidence that would end him. A recording from his own lawyer, detailing every crime my father had committed to take back his company. And in a twist of irony, he had paid the man to destroy it. But money only buys so much loyalty. So when I slid the USB drive across the desk to the SEC investigators, I didn't say a word, just leaned back and watched. It took them 2 hours to go through everything. By the time they were done, the case had flipped. They left my office that evening with an arrest warrant. For my father, I was at home when the news broke. Former CEO indicted for fraud. I didn't need to watch the footage. I could picture it. My father, dragged out of his house in handcuffs, his arrogance finally shattered. Then my phone rang. His number. I let it ring. Once. Twice. Then I picked it up. Silence on the other end. Then a quiet, bitter laugh. You really think you've won? I glanced at the TV. His face, plastered across the screen. The legacy he built reduced to a cautionary tale. I smiled. No, Dad. I know I have. Click. I never spoke to him again. They say revenge is sweet. But the truth? It's complicated. I didn't feel triumphant watching my father go to prison. Didn't feel a rush of satisfaction as his empire collapsed. Because in the end, I didn't just destroy him. I destroyed the last illusion that we were ever a real family. But maybe that was the real victory. Breaking free. And this time, when I walked away, I didn't look back.